Dutch people live longer than Americans. As a matter of fact, statistics show that Dutch people on average live to be 81 years, whereas Americans on average live to be 77 years. And you may be thinking, well, that's only a 4-year difference, it's not that much. And hey, 4 years doesn't seem like a lot, especially in comparison to 81 years or 77 years. But let's look at it through this lens. Imagine if right now, at this moment, you got sentenced to 4 years in prison. It's 2025, you wouldn't get out until 2029. That is a long time. That is enough time for you to change many, many times over as a person. So 4 years is a long time on this earth. And I don't know about you, but although I'm not one of those people who wants to live forever, I would like to have those extra 4 years. Bearing that in mind, in this video, I want to talk about some of the reasons why Dutch people tend to live longer than Americans do. The first of which being the active lifestyle. So throughout this video, in the background, okay, I've positioned the camera in this way for a reason. In the background, you're going to see a lot of people biking and walking. You're going to see a lot of people out and about biking and walking. Now mind you, it is freezing cold out here. I can't feel my fingers, my face is numb, I'm having trouble speaking. It's cold. I can't even think straight. I don't know how I'm filming this video right now. But one thing I've noticed since I've been out here for a little over 1 calendar year now, is that it doesn't matter what the conditions are. It doesn't matter if it's cold, it doesn't matter if it's raining. Dutch people don't care about that. And really, they can't care about it because the weather is like this most of the time. Even in the summer, I was still wearing jackets. And it rains at least, I'd say, 3 days a week here. So, Dutch people, they don't allow the weather to keep them stuck inside. They're active. They're out and about. They're biking. They're walking. You see a lot of children in the background. It seems like pretty much every child here, every teenager, adolescent, whatever, bikes to and from school. And I definitely see a lot of children just playing outside in general out here, much more than I saw back home, which is kind of sad if you think about it, because I was one of those kids. I was outside. I was playing basketball, football, American football at that. I was out and about. I was active. Whereas back home, that just doesn't really seem to be the case anymore, at least where I live back home. But here, not only are the kids active, adults are active. It is a normal, everyday occurrence to see adults walking to the grocery store, biking to the grocery store, maybe biking to work. I don't necessarily know where these people are going because I don't know them, but I see adults biking and walking every single day here. Back home, honestly, you could go multiple days without seeing any adults biking. Maybe in other cities it might be different, but in Dallas, which is maybe the most car-centric city in the whole country, you don't see a whole lot of adults biking because, for one, there's no biking infrastructure, or very limited biking infrastructure, and the limited biking infrastructure that is there was kind of just placed in a city that wasn't really meant for it. So even though there is a little bit of biking infrastructure, it doesn't take you anywhere because the city itself is very spread out. It's a sprawling area, not a dense urban environment like you would see here in the Netherlands. But aside from that, there are also stigmas about biking back home. There are stigmas about being the adult that's biking to and from work, that's walking to and from work, and nobody wants to be that person. Here, the reverse seems to be true, and I'm getting a lot deeper into psychology than I'd like to in this video, but basically, here, you are socially rewarded for walking and biking places, whereas back home, the opposite is true. You are socially punished, you're socially isolated. Maybe that's an extreme way of putting it. I don't want to make it seem like everyone will just hate you and ignore you if you ride your bike, but it's just not something that you see very often for that reason. And because the weather back home isn't really favorable for biking. But once again, Dutch people don't care about the weather. They are biking, they are walking, come hell or high water. So Dutch people are much more active because of that. And of course, activity generally correlates with a longer lifespan, almost invariably. depending on what the activity is. The next reason why Dutch people live longer than Americans is because of the smaller portion sizes. When you go in the grocery store or when you go to a restaurant, the portion sizes here are smaller in general. Really, honestly, everything here is smaller. The cars are smaller, the houses are smaller, the roads are smaller, everything's smaller except for the people. The people, for some reason, are just really, really tall here. You have all these tall 6 feet, 6'3", 6'5" people in this little country, on these little roads, in these little cars, which I don't know, I always find funny. But here I've noticed that everything is smaller, and the portion sizes when it comes to food are no exception to that. So generally speaking, people here eat less food just overall because the portion sizes are smaller. And when you combine that with the increased calorie expenditure, the increased energy expenditure on a daily basis, most people here are not in a caloric surplus, meaning that most people here are not actively gaining weight like they are back home, which is why America has an obesity problem, an obesity epidemic even. That's not an issue here. There are people who are overweight here just like there are overweight people everywhere. And of course, there are various different life factors that play into that aside from just eating and being active or inactive. But the average person here is in much better shape and has much better health than the average American, because the average person here is living a more active lifestyle and controlling their portion. And just anecdotally, I'm somebody who's been actively trying to build muscle, who's been actively trying to gain weight, and I've been eating 3,600 calories a day, and I'm still not gaining weight. Still at 3,600 calories, just because the overall activity level in my day-to-day life has increased so much. Now, of course, part of this is because I'm a gym rat and I go to the gym 7 days a week. But aside from that, how do you think I'm getting to the gym? I'm biking there. I'm biking to the gym and back. That's 1 mile in each direction, 2 miles a day that I'm biking, minimum. Even if you just did that, you would still be in pretty good shape if you just bike 2 miles a day. But then, of course, again, I add the gym to that, an hour and a half, pretty much every day. So for me, my situation is a little bit different. The average person is going to gain weight eating 3,600 calories, but the average Dutch person is not doing that. The average Dutch person is definitely living a much healthier lifestyle, even if the food here, if I'm being completely honest, isn't always the healthiest. I mean, eating chocolate sprinkles on bread for breakfast, having fried food that you can literally just pull out of the wall. The food here isn't always the healthiest. And I'd imagine that if Dutch people ate healthier food in addition to having the smaller portion sizes, the lifespan, the average lifespan, would probably increase to about 85 years. So probably approaching Japan territory. But you gotta balance it out. You wanna be here for a good time as well as a long time. Now, speaking of having a good time, the next reason why Dutch people live longer than Americans on average is because Dutch people are less stressed out. Now listen, stress is relative. There are stressed people here. I'm one of them a lot of the time. I experience a lot of stress here. Granted, I'm not a Dutch citizen, so I don't benefit from the social safety net, and I'm also an entrepreneur, which of course comes with stress by default. But the average person here experiences less absolute stress than the average American because of the social safety net that I just explained. The social safety net here is much, much better. It's much more supportive. So people here don't necessarily have this constant weight on their shoulders of the possibility of going homeless. It just doesn't really seem to be a possibility for most people here unless you just genuinely want to be homeless, or if you're in a situation like me where you're an immigrant and you don't benefit from that same social safety net, which they have measures in place generally to ensure that that can't happen. For example, if my business bank account drops below a certain number of euros, I get deported. So that is a measure that they've put in place to ensure that I don't become homeless here in the Netherlands and I don't essentially end up leeching off of the country, which is fair because I'm not from here. But at the same time, people here, the Dutch citizens, so maybe people like you, if you're from the Netherlands, have this social safety net that just generally decreases the tension that you carry in your day-to-day life. And not only that, but I've noticed that the work-life balance seems to be prioritized here in a way that is not prioritized back home. Now, people have beat this topic to death. Obviously, Europe and America have completely different views about work-life balance, but people here genuinely value work-life balance. It's not just the fact that there are laws in place to ensure that work-life balance is a thing, but people here prioritize it. Whereas back home, people don't really prioritize it in the same way because they can't. How are you going to prioritize work-life balance when not only do you not have the same social safety net, but you're also liable to be fired at any time? Here, one of the biggest shocks for me was realizing that most jobs, if not all jobs, are contract-based, meaning that they can't just fire you unless you do something completely out of left field. They can't just fire you. They can't just lay you off like they could back home, which to me is actually really great. I'm not somebody who wants to work a 9-to-5, hence me being an entrepreneur, but if I was going to work a 9-to-5, I would much rather do it here than back home in the US, where you can get fired at any given time. It seems like here, the safe path is actually pretty safe, whereas back home, the safe path is still a path full of stress and uncertainty. Now, speaking of safety, that is the next reason why Dutch people are less stressed and just generally live longer, is because the Netherlands is a safe place. Now, maybe you're thinking, oh, well, Jordan, you haven't seen this place in Amsterdam or this place in Rotterdam. I'm not saying that there aren't dangerous people here, because there are dangerous people everywhere in the world. But there are far fewer of them here than there are back home, especially in cities like Baltimore, Memphis, St. Louis, New Orleans. Those are places where things can turn left very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. Here in the Netherlands, I feel fully comfortable, or at least mostly comfortable, walking alone at night. Back home, that was something that I didn't really feel very comfortable doing. And I'm a grown man. I can take care of myself. I'm not somebody who potential, I don't know, muggers or attackers or whatever would see as an easy target. So understand that there is a genuine, viable threat back home of me being harmed or just generally taken advantage of in some way or another, maybe robbed or whatever, that doesn't really exist here in that same capacity. And I think a big part of the reason why is because of the gun laws. Obviously, here you can't really have a gun, I think, unless you're a farmer. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure only farmers are allowed to have guns, or maybe hunters, I don't know. But actually, I don't even know if you're allowed to hunt here. If you are, then I'm sure you'd be allowed to have a gun. But back home, just a regular person who lives a regular life and works a 9-to-5 can have a gun. Which, now that I think about it and now that I say it out loud, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because generally, the only reason why you would need a gun in that context is to defend yourself from people who also have guns. But that's a different discussion for a different day. I'm not here to talk about the gun laws or whatever. Safety is a way of life here in the Netherlands. Safety is the default state of being. Back home, I'm not going to say that it's the most dangerous place in the world, because it is far from that. There are much worse places than even the worst places back home in the US. But here in the Netherlands, I've never felt like I was in danger. I've never, not even once, felt like I was in danger. And maybe that's just me being naive. Maybe that's me not being aware of my surroundings. But, I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen anything or been anywhere that made me feel unsafe. And I mean, even areas that my girlfriend, who's born and raised in the Netherlands, considers to be ghetto, in her words, not mine, I still feel completely comfortable. The areas that she thinks are ghetto, to me, look like regular, nice areas. I haven't seen an area here visually speaking at least, that made me feel uncomfortable. I have yet to see it. So I don't know, maybe there are areas where it's not as safe, but at least the areas that I've seen here are extremely safe. Safe enough to where if I had children, I would feel comfortable allowing them to just roam freely out and about. And of course, that right there brings about less stress, and it decreases the number of premature deaths because you have fewer people shooting each other in the streets, fewer incidents happening, even traffic accidents. I don't have a statistic to back this up, but I am almost sure, I would bet all of my money in my account right now that fewer people per capita die in car accidents here in the Netherlands than they do back home, because the roads are safer as well and the drivers are better. So that's another element of safety that brings about a higher average life expectancy. So aside from all of those things, aside from the safety, aside from the active lifestyle, another component of the Dutch life that makes the Dutch lifespan longer on average is the importance of family and community. Now this right here ties right back into what I said about work-life balance, but I've noticed that people here are very family oriented, extremely family oriented, to the extent that it seems like it's exceedingly rare for people to just move across the country or even move to another country to pursue better opportunities. It seems like people here would prefer to be closer to their families, even if it means that they have to forego better opportunities. Now, of course, that's a sweeping generalization. Not everyone is like that, but I don't know, the conversations that I've had with Dutch people, something that they seem to ask me a lot is, do you miss your family? They always seem to ask me that, and they never really ask me about career or things of that nature, at least not as much as the family questions. And those questions right there let me know that that's what they value. If they were in my position, that's what they would miss the most. And truthfully, that's what I miss the most. I do miss my family more than anything back home, but that's also in part because I create my own opportunities wherever I go, because I'm an entrepreneur, and as long as I have this camera with me, I can make it work. So that's not really a factor on my part, but I do feel like as an American, I definitely have more of the mentality that if there is an opportunity for me somewhere else, I will leave everything behind. I will leave all of my loved ones. I will leave everything that I know to pursue that opportunity, which is the case right now. I mean, you see, I'm in a foreign country, so I'm living, breathing proof of that mentality.